as we said in the first video, we calculated our class width to be 8. Again, the example we're using, remember, is how far do Rhodes State students live from campus? We collected our data from our class and put it into our calculator. So now we want to calculate or display a frequency table. So in your homework, it's going to ask you to show a frequency table with class limits, class boundaries, midpoints, frequency, relative frequency, and cumulative frequency. When we know our class width is 8, which we just calculated, we begin our class limits, which are our groups, with the lowest data value. So when we look at our list, we know our smallest data value is 4. So that is the lowest limit of our first class. Now, instead of going right to get the upper limit, we're going to get the lower limit of the second class. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to add our class width to the lowest limit of the first class. So 4 plus 8 is 12. This gives us the lower limit of the second class. Now, to get our upper limit of the first class, we back up our digit 12, lower limit of the second class, by 1. So this is 11. So the first class, we're going to count in our frequency here in a minute how many people in our class live between 4 miles and 11 miles of campus. Now again, we started the class limit with the smallest value in our list, and we added the class width to get the lower limit of the second class. We can again add the class width. 12 plus 8 gives us 20 for the lower limit of the third class. 20 plus 8 is 28. That's our fourth class. 28 plus 8, we get 36. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 classes. Okay, again, we can back up 20 by 1, we get 19. Back up 28 by 1, we get 27. 36 by 1, we'll get 35. And as you notice, we added our class width down here. You'll notice the upper limit's the same thing is true. We could have said 11 plus 8 gives us 19. 19 plus 8 gives us 27. 27 plus 8 gives us 35. So get our last upper limit, we can say 35 plus 8, which is 43. The reason we do not add 8 to get the upper limit of our first class is because our class width being 8 is how many digits fall here. Well, if you count our digits, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, there's 8 digits between 4 and 11. That's why we add the class width to get the lower limit of the next class. Those are our class limits. Now, the class boundaries and the midpoints we will calculate in 1 second. The two main columns in our frequency table are the class limits and the frequency. So, to get the frequency, we want to count how many students live between 4 and 11 miles from campus. So, if you remember in the last video, we sorted the data on our calculator. We can now count how many are between 4 and 11. I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 data values. So that is my frequency, 5. Now I want to count the data values between 12 and 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Whoops, too far. 7. So I have 7 between 12 and 19 miles. Now I count between 20 and 27 miles. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 5. So back to 5. Now I'm going to count between 28 and 35. 1, 2, 2. And now I'm going to count between 36 and 43. Oh, just 1. That's my last one. Okay? Now, in our original problem that we talked about, we had said we wanted 5 classes, and that's how we had calculated our class width. Again, the homework problems will tell you how many classes to use. Now, to finish out our frequency table, we're going to calculate our class boundaries and our midpoints, and this will help us draw a histogram, which will visually display what our data is doing. Already we can see most of our students are driving between 4 and 27 miles to campus. So the class boundaries, what we do, it's like we're taking some air into those class limits and just expanding them by a little bit, okay? So we're going to expand them by a half, because when we actually do our histogram, which is like a bar graph, we want those bars to touch. So we're going to move these, we're going to increase the 11 to 11.5, and we're going to decrease the lower limit by half to 3.5. So it's like you stuck a little air in that and just poofed it out. So the same thing for the second class. We're going to decrease the 12 to 11.5 and increase the 19 to 19.5. These are so the boundaries touch. In an original frequency table, the class limits cannot be overlapping. So here we're making them touch. So again, this becomes 19.5. This is 27.5, 27.5 to 35.5. So we're decreasing the lower limit by a half, and we're increasing the upper limit by a half for the class boundary. For the midpoint, we're finding halfway between the lower and upper class limit. So we're going to add the limits together and divide by 2. So I have 15 divided by 2, which gives me 7.5. That's halfway between 4 and 11. Once you have the first midpoint, we can do the same thing for the second class, or we can just add the class width. So I'm just going to add 8. So 15.5 plus 8 is 23.5, plus 8 is 31.5, plus 8 is 39.5. So we have our class limits, our class boundaries, our midpoints, our frequency. Now the relative frequency, we're going to take the frequency for each class and divide by our sample size. So when we had collected this data, I had said there were 20 students. One way to verify that we got them all is to add up our frequencies. 5 plus 7 is 12, plus 5 is 17, plus 2 is 19, plus 1 is 20. 20 is our sample size. The notation for sample size is a lowercase n. The notation for population size is capital N, and we'll talk more about that in a little bit. So the relative frequency we calculate by taking the frequency for each class and dividing it by the sample size. So 5 divided by 20, which you may know reduces to 1/4 or 0.25. Oftentimes the relative frequency will show as a decimal. We do 7 divided by 20, and we get 0.35. 5 divided by 20, 0.25. 2 divided by 20 is 1/10 or 0.1. And 1 divided by 20 is 0.05. And those are our relative frequencies. The last column is our cumulative frequencies. The cumulative frequency starts with the frequency for the lowest class and adds in the frequency. So we add the frequency of all the classes below it. So for the second class, we have the frequency of 7 plus the frequency of 5 gives us 12. For the third class, we have a frequency of 5 added to this cumulative frequency of 12, giving us 17. Add our 2, we get 19. Add our 1, we get 20. The last number in your cumulative frequency column should be your sample size. We will now go to make the histogram.